Hello students, hope you have learnt previous classes lesson. The other day we started chapter 12 reproduction in plants. What is reproduction? Modes of reproduction in plants. Asexual reproduction in plants we discussed. Asexual reproduction in plants takes place by various means. These are vegetative reproduction, budding, fragmentation and spore formation. Today we are going to discuss sexual reproduction in plants. Flowers are the reproductive organs in flowering plants. You have learnt earlier the structure of a flower. A typical flower has four important parts present at the base of a flower called thalamus. These parts are sepals, petals, stamens and pistil. Stamens and pistil are the reproductive parts of a flower. Stamens. These are the male reproductive parts of a flower. Each stamen has two parts, filament and anther. Filament is a long, slender part of that carries anther on top. Anther is a two-lobed structure present at the tip of a filament. Each anther contains pollen grains, which produce male gametes. Pistil. It is the female reproductive part of a flower. Each pistil has three parts: stigma, style and ovary. Stigma is uppermost part, which receives the pollen grains. Style forms the neck of the pistil, attached to stigma. Ovary forms the lowermost swollen part. It contains one or more ovules. Each ovule contains the female gamete, called an egg. So what are gametes? Gametes are mature reproductive cells. Types of flowers. There are some flowers, those have both stamens and pistil. And this type of flowers are called bisexual flowers. Most flowers are bisexual. For example, mustard, rose, petunia, etc. Whereas some flowers have only one reproductive part, that is either only stamens or only pistil. So, if only stamens are present in a flower, it is a male flower. If only pistil is present, it is a female flower. Male and female flowers may be present on the same plant. Now we are going to discuss pollination. What are pollen grains or where these are found? Pollen grains which are borne on anther. Generally, pollen grains have a tough protective coat which prevents them from drying up. Since pollen grains are light, they can be carried by wind or water. Insects visit flowers and carry away pollen on their bodies. Some of the pollen lands on the stigma of a flower of the same kind. This is called pollination. So what is pollination? The transfer of pollen from the anther to the stigma of a flower is called pollination. This is of two types. If the pollen lands on the stigma of the same flower, it is called self-pollination. When the pollen of a flower lands on the stigma of another flower of the same plant or that of a different plant of the same kind, it is called cross-pollination. Immediately after pollination, that is when pollen grains lands on stigma, a pollen tube arises from a pollen grain. Each pollen tube has male gametes or the male reproductive cells. Pollen tube elongates and grows through the style to reach the ovary, where ovule is present. Pollen tube enters the ovule and releases its male gametes. Male gamete fuses with the female gamete or the egg cell in the ovule to form a zygote. This process a fusion of male and female gamete to form a zygote is called fertilization. The cell which is formed after fusion of the gametes is called a zygote. After fertilization, the zygote develops into an embryo. The ovary grows into a fruit and ovules grow into seeds. On germination of a seed during the favorable conditions, an embryo gives rise to a new plant. So, to sum up, today we discussed about sexual reproduction in plants. Flower, the reproductive part of a plant, parts of a flower, types of flower, male and female flower, then pollination, types of pollination, fertilization, male reproductive cells, male and female reproductive cells or the gametes, zygote formation, then zygote, then fruit and seed formation. So today up to this much. Thank you, students.